Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. In this episode, recorded live in early March, backstage at the Restaurants Canada trade show in Toronto, Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, Senior Director, Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University, returns to the podcast as my special guest. We talk pre-COVID-19 macro trends in dining out, meal kits, his Zamboni theory of retail cannabis, and the big picture perspective on plant-based proteins, the environment and its impact on food decisions, and what drives the pace of change in food trends. Next, just off the plane from London, England, later that same day is Dr. Morgaine Gaye, food futurologist, talking about how she practices her craft, helping food companies and advertising agencies see around corners, plus the three big future trends in food. Last but certainly not least, a longtime friend and colleague, Terry Donnelly, CEO at Hill Street Beverage Company, joins me as we catch up on the latest developments in his national leading non-alcoholic beverage company, poised to take advantage of Retail Cannabis 2.0 with his top-of-the-line category creating infused cannabis beverages. But first, let's jump right into my conversation with Sylvain Charlebois. Sylvain, welcome back to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
Very good. Sunny out. We're at the RC show. Can't feel better.
For the listeners who haven't heard our conversations before, give us a bit of background about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I cover, so I'm Sylvain Charlebois, Director of the Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University. We have two labs, one in Truro, Nova Scotia, one in Halifax. And what we do is we try to understand the future of food, basically. Trying to understand not only trends, but how these trends can impact the entire food system, really, whether it's coming from food service or food retailing. So we're macro analysts, and we use machine learning mostly to predict the future.
So it's a great segue. Let's talk about some research that you've released recently or been part of recently. I'm curious about what your thoughts and what your findings are about how people in 2020 are going to eat. Since we're at the restaurant show, are they going to eat out more? Are they going to go to grocery stores and make their own more? Are they buying more meal kits? What have you learned?
Yeah, I think context is going to change a lot. Our typical meals as a family or with groups is slowly fading away, I guess. A lot of people are eating alone, people are eating at work, but most importantly, people are eating away. Much more than ever before. Right now, the average Canadian will spend about 37% of their budget on food processed and consumed outside the home. Wow. And based on our analysis, that ratio will reach 50-50 by 2032. The Americans are at 50-50. They've been at 50-50 for 4 years now. I think they're at 52-48. 52% of their budget will go to food process and consume outside the home. So, and we're catching up to the Americans. That is a big shift, and that's why I think the RC show is getting bigger, because there are more opportunities out there.
Now, when you talk about the 50-50 split, that's in budget rather than occasions. Are the two kind of similar? In other words, it's money, right? It's
basically the money. Yeah.
So when I look at a typical week occasion, 7 occasions to have something to eat, maybe 14 if you throw in lunch, is that kind of 50-50 still hold true, or because we know it's a little more expensive to eat out for sure?
If it's processed and consumed outside the home, it basically counts as food service. Right. The only gray area are meal kits. Meal kits are a market worth about $400 million now in Canada. It's no chuck and change anymore. Yeah. But that you still have to process at home, so that actually would count as a product processed and consumed at home.
Okay.
Food delivery apps, though, processing actually occurs outside the home, so that would count as food service.
Okay, so I understand how you're making that definition.
Yeah. Processing means cooking.
Right. And in a meal kit, you assemble. You don't, the ingredients are.
There's 5 or 10 minutes of work that needs to be done at home, which actually accounts for cooking, and therefore it actually would count as food retailing.
So let's talk about meal kits, their popularity. You've already kind of scoped the size of the market. It's an interesting line of business. I look at Blue Apron in the news even last week. I mean, they're going to hit the concrete wall sometime soon. Metro got involved. It's hard to
make money.
Well, it's funny, right? The dichotomy is they're very popular. Yeah. Though I see a lot of churn from, even when I talk to food meal kit, their customers churn a lot. Tough to make money. Metro bought Miss Fresh and then sold it, didn't meet their expectations. So even the mainline grocers who've tried different formats haven't been wildly successful at it.
No.
What do you think it's this dichotomy, right? It's popular, but it's expensive to do. What do you think the future is for meal kits?
I think there's a case, a strong case still, despite the negativity around meal kits. I actually do see value when it comes to food waste. If you talk to anybody using these meal kits, there's a little waste. You actually do reduce the amount of waste significantly as a household. Yep. The other issue, of course, is that you're empowering consumers to go back to the kitchen. They feel creative. They feel like chefs within seconds. You still have some work to do, and still you have to do the dishes. But I think there's something there that is of value that's missing. The negatives, obviously, packaging is a big issue. Price points are very high, $10 to $12 on average, and based on how the industry is performing financial-wise, I suspect that price points could go up because companies aren't making any money. I think the only company that actually declared a profit in the last quarter is HelloFresh, and that's it. Everyone else is still losing money.
Yeah, and they're big global companies, so they kind of have something to leverage,
they
right?
Can absorb some of their operational costs and overhead. The challenge, of course, is to develop an infrastructure while serving fresh, safe food to people, different people. There's also the issue of IP. You actually will deliver recipes to people. Nothing prevents them from stealing, quote unquote, your recipes and do everything on their own and save a little bit of money. So there's lots of ifs and buts with this sector, but grocers are looking into that space because they can create synergies between what they do, food service, and what people are actually looking for.
Yeah, there's obvious synergies, right? So it should work somehow. I talked to Walter Robb from Whole Foods on the main stage last year, and his opinion was a little different. He said, I think the Uber Eats and the restaurant delivery will undercut the meal kits, and that's what he sees as taking the cream off the top.
Actually, I see them as two totally different products, and that's why in our latest report we actually looked at meal kits and we looked at food delivery apps because I think they provide different benefits overall. I think it's hard to compare both. They're two different, in my mind, two different phenomena.
But they are competing for the food occasion, I guess was his point, right? So he said, they're two very different things. But
they're competing if you actually look at both features as a mechanism to get food to people's homes. But that's pretty much it. I mean, food delivery apps are exploding. I mean, it's worth $1.5 billion, and we actually are expecting sales to reach $2 billion by early 2021.
I see there's a whole bunch of sessions here on this ghost kitchen thing where there's not even real restaurants. There's all kinds of things.
And so because $1.5 billion is too much money to ignore. So you got to look into that space. Right now, my concern is that main big American chains are dominating that space right now. Anybody who's used Skip the Dishes, Uber Eats will notice that, my God, it's all the chains I know. Where are the independents? Where's Indian cuisine? Where's Italian cuisine? Where is Chinese cuisine, Japanese, Korean? And I think as this market grows, that market will become a little bit more clustered and sophisticated. And that's probably why you're going to start seeing more ghost kitchens, because both go together. I was talking to dairy farmers last week in Oxford County, and I told them, listen, this ghost kitchen concept may actually be something that could allow your industry to grow. Imagine starting a restaurant in the GTA, but call it from the farm. A fresh meal delivered.
Well, the American farmers do that. They actually have restaurants in Washington, in the heart of lobbying, where they actually serve and they put out cookbooks that is brought to you by the American Farming Association. I think it's a clever strategy.
So when it comes to marketing channels, or how do you connect your customer base? I mean, these ghost kitchens can provide several opportunities for everyone in the supply chain, from farmers to grocers, and I could see a grocer here in Canada start a new virtual restaurant chain supported by ghost kitchens. Why not?
It's such an interesting idea, this whole grocerant thing, right? You walk into a farm boy and you just see, the investment they're making in
that's the physical,
food, right?
and they
at
were
the back door have the ghost part, right?
And they weren't very good at food service for a long time, but grocers are getting better. they don't have a choice.
Right, they have to, right?
Yeah.
Well, it circles all the way back to your first point about how people are shifting where and how they consume things. So, speaking of shifting how people consume things, let's talk about retail cannabis for a bit. There's a bit of chatter.
Yes.
There's a bit of chatter back and forth on LinkedIn that beer sales were down, and some people thought it was retail cannabis that was, coincidentally eating in. It feels to me though like retail cannabis isn't growing the market yet. It's just shifting it from the black market, and that ready-to-drink beverages are really the thing that is the modern challenge to beer consumption. What do you think?
I'm one of the few that who believes that cannabis actually has had an impact on beer sales. I do. I know that most people disagree. And BC to me is the place, because BC is the one place where beer sales has been affected the least, and the consumption of illegal cannabis was the highest before we legalized cannabis.
Okay, that's it. You're coming at it from a different direction.
From a different direction, and so when you want to assess impact of the legalization of cannabis, I think it has had an impact somehow. We just can't really measure it for sure.
Yeah.
But because I was actually out in BC with a brewer there, and that's kind of where they're coming from. And I agree with them, absolutely, because they saw their sales not being affected as much than the rest of the country. And it's a national brewer.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. It's. I thought initially it was going to be the hard liquor sales that were going to be impacted first. People doing shots just to get a little bit high, so to speak. It's just, I'm not going to even bother doing that. Anyway, I guess we'll see. Certainly, there's ready-to-drink beverages that we were just chatting off, Mike. There's a huge line in Toronto for the launch of White Claw, this hard seltzer, which I've been hearing about, and there's a buzz, so to speak, about.
Well, the marketing
is
something that will need to be refined given our framework. I mean, there's not much you can do, but and of course, a couple of days ago, I was at an FCPC event speaking about CBD and the virtues of CBD and how this market can do better, because I did call it the era of the Zamboni right now for cannabis. It was a really tough and rough first period.
Tough.
Now all players are off the ice. Some of them will come back.
Yeah.
We're cleaning the ice. The ice will look better for the second period. That's what we're at right now with cannabis. I think you're going to start seeing some sound, value-focused strategies in the cannabis sector, not just a bunch of farmers trying to grow a crop and make money.
Well, I've been talking lately in the past couple of months, the excitement in Ontario, now the market's open up. You've got some real solid operators who are going to start opening stores. So I think, what we've been talking about is now you get to be a retailer. Now you get to figure out why people would go to your cannabis store, driving past 3 others and go to your store.
Exactly.
You get to figure out your merchandise strategy, the 2.0 and all that stuff. Yeah. Let's talk about why you're here today. What are you talking about? You're on the main stage today. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm on the main stage with some great friends, actually, I've known for many years, and the topic is going to be trends. So each of us will have a different take on trends. I'm going to be looking at, of course, the plant-based trend and different trends that we've been hearing about, like keto, the ketogenic diet. The ketogenic diet has been really in the news a lot, and we just published a report on it, so I'll be sharing some new data with folks. But also I will talk about how the environment, or this climate crisis, is affecting how people are actually
so interesting.
Making decisions when it comes to food, whether it's in a restaurant or in a retail store, and it's big. And let me tell you, things are changing so fast. Like within 6 months ago, if I would have presented you some data about what's going on in the marketplace in Canada, right now things have changed completely. And so I'm going to be showing the public how things have changed in just 12 months.
I guess, for my last question, and you've actually got to go and get on the stage.
That's right.
What's the key driver of that rapidity of change? Like, is it Gen Zs? Is it demographic? Is it psychographic? What is driving change at that kind of pace?
Well, I think people tend to forget that the oldest millennials will turn 40 this year. I mean, they're not kids anymore.
Sure.
They have kids, and that money is starting to be way more influential. And they have a voice through social media, and they are using it a lot and effectively. If you're in business, if you're in the food business, whether it's retail or service, you cannot ignore that voice. If you do, you're dead.
Right. Well, on that note, and again, you've got to get back off and going to the main stage. Thanks again so much for being on The Voice of Retail. Always a treat to chat with you and catch up.
My pleasure.
Morgaine, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you?
Thank you very much. Good, thank you.
Well, we're here at the Restaurant Canada show in Toronto. You've just joined us all the way over from England, so welcome.
Thank you so much. The weather's fabulous here, isn't it?
It is.
Loving it.
It is. So listen, tell me a bit about your personal and professional story. What do you do? Who are you? And how did you come to be?
Yeah, so I'm a food futurologist, so I'm a trend forecaster for the food business, predominantly. I look at what people are going to be eating in 5-10 years' time, but more importantly, why they're going to be eating that. And then what consumers can do, what we can do, what brands can do to extrapolate that going forward. And what I do also is I work with food brands to take their product to the next level, to address some of the issues that they may currently be having. So.
And how did you get to be what you do today? Like, what's your backstory? You've been in professional, you're advertising, media. Like, how did you come to be a food futurist or futurologist?
Well, I think one of the things in life is that if you fear something or you don't want something, you think about it often enough, it's definitely going to happen to you. And I did not want to work in food. It was my nightmare. So I'm living my actual nightmare. I'm unemployable. I think actually most of us end up doing what we're doing not because we knew our trajectory at school, but often through events in our lives and things that happen possibly even from childhood. And I think for me, food's really the red herring. What I'm looking at is all of the other things that I find interesting.
So complex, right? What goes into food? Social, everything, cultural,
all
everything,
of
right?
that. Geopolitics, economics, aspiration. Food's very aspirational in the West, and in fact in every country, whether we know it or not. So all of the things that play into that, whether it's fashion and interiors and media, and all of those social indicators, how we come together with people. It's family, it's religion, it's stuff that's in vitro in the womb. We develop our scent preferences. Sure. So I think I like the variety of all of those things. And I have a background in TV, actually. I was a TV presenter as a teenager and worked in film and media and also worked in a little bit of advertising as an artist. So.
Well, walk me through your process. So everyone has a process. I remember following a woman named Faith Popcorn for many years.
Oh gosh, she was like the original.
She was like the original,
yeah,
right?
Right,
I remember 20 years ago, and she had a process. And what's your process? How do you divine?
I'd love to know what her process was.
Yeah,
my process. I think it's a little bit by osmosis to start with. I am seeing what everybody else sees, but I'm noticing it. I think I'm quite perceptive and observant. So I think it starts in that place. I'm always looking for things, and that can be everywhere. I'm noticing, okay, people aren't wearing wristwatches so much anymore. You actually are, but a lot of people don't. So what's that mean? Or how does that shift our perception of time? What's happening with that? How do we, how did meals became the way that we measured time, and now that's shifting? So noticing little things, and I travel a lot for my job, so I'm always looking at everything: storefront, shop windows, people's behaviour, interactions, and then trying to develop a theory about what that means. And sometimes it's like the Rolodex of the mind; it just gets parked in the mind. And then it comes up. And I was like,
connecting disparate parts, right, for what you observe?
Exactly. And then I try to make a connection, make a theory. Once I make a theory, then I try to prove or disprove that. And I do that by then trying to find examples across categories. So in food, in fashion, in tech, in anything really that touches consumer behaviour or our behaviour, social behaviour.
Right.
And then I start to develop a theory. So it's almost like a filtration process.
Right. So tell me what the top 3 things you're thinking about today from a food perspective. Like, what are when you think about, when you're here presenting and when you're talking to your clients, and what are the things that are front of your mind when you're talking about food and the future?
I don't really have a thing that's front of my mind. But things that I'm interested in at the moment, I'm very interested in the future of water. What's in our water supply, how we are using water to shower with, wash with, what does that mean? How can we change that? Water for an energy source, the massive cataclysmic droughts and how that affects grain prices and how that affects meat prices and therefore what we eat, how we consume, food prices going up, how we think about waste because we can't afford to, all of those things. So I think about water. It's a big, big topic and that's really the top line. I think about waste. So what that is meaning, and the brands I'm working with are about really changing the packaging But it's not just about, the idea of sustainability is 20 years out of date. We're not sustainable. So then thinking about refills, really. We even compostability, which is 8 weeks to landfill, can have complications. So we're really, and even edible packaging, it's really about reusability and second use, or when producers are making things, how they can produce something with the waste materials, so have a second line based on the waste materials. I'm really interested in that. And I think the other thing, I'm really interested in Gen Z, so the generation coming through who are the dark generation. They are interesting. Gosh, they're interesting.
Digital natives.
Oh, yeah, but they're the real deal. They are the real deal. They're going to bring brown back.
That's interesting. I've heard a couple of interesting things here, like the world on your plate. Someone says basically when Gen Z goes out to eat, they pull all these things you've been talking about, sustainability. Okay. They pull these things together and on their plate and what they're eating. What the other thing I heard and was talking about at the show is meal kits. Which one of the benefits of meal kits is there's very little waste, food waste, right? So that's, but they're hard to put together, and all those kind of things. So very interesting. So, have you thought about or done any work? Because of course we're talking in Canada today, and Canada is the world of legal cannabis. Have you done any thinking about cannabis and edibles and cannabis and food types, CBD?
Yeah. So I've been talking about CBD for quite a few years, before it was really legalised. Definitely where CBD was really unknown. People didn't really know, am I going to get high with CBD?
Sure.
So looking at CBD in food, but I think for me that plays into, what I tend to do is look at a bigger trend, and they're the little things that play into that. Yeah. And what that really is about for me is it's looking at a way in which we're going to understand the human self, and this is really the change from generations. Hundreds of years of our human behaviour has been focused on having things, owning stuff, having an education, getting a car, getting a bigger car, blah, blah, blah. And we're moving now really right now, and this is why it's such a destabilising time. We're moving into a time of knowing. And part of that is really about the optimised self and about understanding what we need, not to survive, but to thrive. Right. CBD being part of that conversation, but other things like the gut microbiome, DNA, how we're going to really understand the nutrition that we each individually need, as opposed to, it's personalised. Personalised nutrition. This is really about you, and understanding that all of our wellness, our second brain is the gut, and how brands are going to play into that, and how food is going to play into that, and tech, specifically tech.
Well, the broader movement really is food, not as nutrition, because that's kind of somewhat of a given, at least in the developed world. But now thinking about individualized, optimized food, is that where that CBD starts to take place?
Absolutely. So CBD in that, and also everything we put on our skin, 80% we absorb into our bloodstream. So there's going to, like I said, nothing exists in a vacuum. Food, beauty, all of that stuff is going to... We're really just seeing a confluence of everything that we know and all of the stuff that we use and buy. Interesting. So if people want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, how do they do that? There's always string, can and tin. That doesn't work. I can do anything, any kind of social media. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. Oh, no, don't contact me on Facebook, because people always end up on my personal site.
That gets confusing.
Well, people I don't have a personal site, and I won't add them because it's my personal one. I have a professional one, but nobody finds it. So forget the Facebook. And email. So I am... Website? You got a great website I was on that tells a bit of your backstory as well, right? So it's morgainegaye.com. Okay. Pretty much everything is Morgaine Gaye, Morgaine Gaye. And they can, like I said, Instagram, LinkedIn, it's all on there. My website, info@Morgaine Gaye. Fantastic. Fantastic. Reach for the stars at Morgaine Gaye. Whatever you like. Well, listen, thanks so much for sitting down with the Voice of Retail. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to see you here on this side of the pond, so to speak, and I wish you well for the rest of your visit. Thank you. Can you make better weather next time I come, please? I'll work on that. Okay, great. I'll see if I can adjust that. That's great. Thanks. Thank you. Terry, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
Very well, Michael. Thanks for having me.
I think, thinking back, you may be, other than a few other folks that I went to high school with, I think I've known you the longest. You might be my longest tenured, so to speak.
Oh, yeah. We go back
interview.
to,
We go back. Late 90s, right?
Mid-90s.
Mid-90s.
Mid-90s. The web was still a thing.
Yeah.
People were talking about, have you heard about the internet?
I remember. So that was in your days of finding people, and let's start there. So tell me a bit about your personal and professional journey and what you do and what you did and what you do now.
Yeah. So I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I was a partner in an executive search firm called Mandrake for 20 years, managing partner there. First 10 years, I was really just building my practice, and turning into a successful company.
Yeah.
But the second 10 years, I became a partner at a venture capital firm. So I ended up becoming a board member and investor and partner in 12 different companies, 6 of them publicly traded companies on either the venture or the Toronto Stock Exchange. And they range from companies that did wireless tracking in mining technologies to video games to mobile media and marketing to digital media companies. And then finally, after 10 years of doing that, I had launched a company called AdCentricity, which was a major digital media platform, and that was acquired. And I ended up getting recruited by a $1 billion advertising agency to become their chief marketing officer. So a company called MDC Partners, which owns a portfolio of about 70 ad agencies all over the world. And so I ended up as the CMO there, managing global brands like Budweiser and Google and Samsung. And
working with Miles Nadal, right?
Miles was my boss.
Yep.
And so we had a really good run, was with them about 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
And the last big brand launch I worked on was actually Budweiser Prohibition. So Budweiser's first branded non-alcoholic beer.
Yep.
And it was in the course of launching that we started to hear about non-alcoholic beverages and cannabis and their potential to be the carrier liquid for cannabis-infused beverages, because the regulators would never allow alcohol and cannabis to be in the same product.
Right.
They don't even allow alcohol and energy and caffeine to be blended unless it's a naturally occurring thing, such as a coffee.
I mean, they're barely allowed in Canada to sell in the same places as Nova Scotia.
Yeah, you can't sell a Red Bull and vodka. Right. You can sell a Red Bull, and then you can sell a vodka, but you can't sell them together. Right.
That's not a ready-to-drink beverage that's available today.
Exactly. Right. And so I ended up leaving MDC and taking over this company called Mad Virgin Drinks. Which had made a non-alcoholic wine and beer, a portfolio of wines and a couple of beers.
And you were distributed in major grocery retail stores?
And they were in about 500 stores at the time. Had been around for 7-8 years, but not really going anywhere fast. And so ended up taking over that company, terminating the Mad relationship. Because as noble a cause as Mad is, it's a terrible brand for a beverage.
It doesn't get you excited about the beverage opportunity.
Beverages, think of champagne. Probably one of the most celebratory occasions of your life is cracking that bottle of champagne, right? Yeah. And it's synonymous with celebration. And having a Mad branded champagne, like nobody wants to crack open a celebratory beverage that reminds them of dead teenagers and grieving widows, right? Like it's just not a congruent brand.
Did not mix well, to use the vernacular of your
exactly. Yes, good one.
Thank you.
And so we ended up renaming the company Hill Street and taking it public. And all we had to do was figure out a way to get the cannabis in the beverage without messing up the taste.
Right.
And so we discovered a technology, biotech company called Lexaria that had developed this technology process to convert cannabis oil into a water-soluble powder. And so we licensed their patent portfolio and are now in the final stages of preparing to launch cannabis-infused wine and beer and cocktails into the legal cannabis edibles marketplace. So it's been a 3-year journey.
I remember meeting in the living room and talking about it early on.
Early days.
Sure.
So we've raised $13 million in capital over the period of time and getting our facility in the final stages. And we have beverages already formulated, ready to go.
And off mic, have you tried the...
Tastes great, works great.
Right.
I can make it. And the great thing about it is it's like wine or it's like craft beer. It's a completely artisanal product that can be handmade, handcrafted, small batch produced. Cannabis has a lot of the same attributes of the place, the taste of place, or they call the terroir, right, that exists in wine. Cannabis changes based on who the grower is, based on where it was grown or when
even
it was grown.
Even as an infusion into
even as
your
an
product.
infusion, because the plant extract, if you take that plant extract and keep it in its intact form as a pure extract, it has attributes as a plant that no other version of that plant will have. And that makes you feel differently.
But doesn't that make manufacturing very difficult for consistency purposes?
It does, absolutely.
That's got to be the tough part, right?
Absolutely. And do you expect one vintage to the next of wine to be exactly the same?
No, I do not.
There you go.
Interesting.
So to us,
you expect the feeling or the phenomenon to be consistent. Like if I want a social, a beverage that gives me the sociability, I expect that to be consistent.
Yeah.
Maybe not the flavor profile.
Largely, you can do that with cannabis by the cultivar, by the strain. So if you have a particular strain that's high in limonene or pinene, then those terpenes actually will make you consistently feel uplifted or invigorated. Those kinds of things.
From bottle to bottle, vintage to vintage.
You can change those terpene contents so that one type of beverage, a Sauvignon Blanc, makes you feel social and engaged and fun. Another one, a Cabernet Sauvignon, would make you feel relaxed and just want to lay on the couch and just sit back and enjoy and luxuriate in a beverage that's a full-bodied Cab Sauv. So we're matching the cannabis cultivar to the beverage profile. And that's kind of the stage we're at right now, is really getting into the artisanship of identifying which cultivated strains of cannabis create experiences that go well with a particular beverage profile.
Because when you talk to great bud tenders, they talk about the entourage effect more than they talk about strains. And, they say, listen, there's this interactivity between strains and terpenes, and that's
and that's exactly it. And you cannot do that with a cannabis isolate or distillate. The only way you can do that is if you're working with the whole plant extract that has the entourage effect, has all of the terpenes and the flavonoids and the phenols and all of the major and minor cannabinoids that all kind of come together to create that differentiated physiological experience that you're getting from smoking or vaping that particular strain. So we're basically capturing that in a bottle.
So you've been involved on, directly or indirectly, of course, for listeners who may not be as well versed, Cannabis 2.0 products legal now in Canada. It is thought that the beverages are the most difficult to make because you both have to have a flavor profile. It's not easy, right?
Yeah, it's definitely not easy.
Difficult. So you've been...
it's not for the faint of heart.
You've been waiting, watching, and getting...
And formulating and testing and working with scientists.
But you haven't had long to test, right? I mean, you could only legally test it since October, right?
October, but the thing about cannabis is that, if you're purchasing it yourself, then how you use it yourself,
I see.
You can experience on your own, right? And so we're taking all of those personal experiences and kind of applying them from a commercial standpoint to understand the response, to understand how to work with this, understand what to do with it. And so we've had the opportunity to work with a number of different growers that have different unique strains and that are able to cultivate for us on a very small scale the product. But from a commercial standpoint, that's kind of the next phase that we're getting into. Once we get the license, we'll be now applying all of that personal experience into a commercial environment.
So the next steps in your business are to get your facility licensed under the process, and then you go for distribution, right?
And then we go for distribution. And so we've been in front of pretty much every provincial wholesaler, the government wholesalers, and quite a number of the retailers, probably half of the major retailers in the country. And the great thing is that they see the format as unique because we're the only company that's walked in to talk to them with a 750 ml bottle of wine in our bag.
Because everyone else is more focused on the smaller...
individual servings.
Ready to drink
cans,
size.
Ready to drink size, And if you were going to come to my place for dinner, what would you bring? A 4-pack of cans or a bottle of wine?
A bottle of wine,
And that one moment, that one occasion, every single retailer, the light bulb goes off, and they go, I get why this is important. I get why I need to have this on my shelf so that I can give to consumers something that works to fill that gap, that sort of social ritual that we use wine quite effectively.
Well, and you get the benefits of the low calories. You get all the other benefits, right? And the sociability. And I suppose you can also adjust the dose, so to speak. And as you said, some can be more social, and others can be a little more. Experience will be a little more intense.
Exactly, and we're also creating extracts, like capsules and tablets and things like that. That for those who need more than what is allowable in the legal dose, that they can supplement their experience with the exact same strain of cannabis that's in the bottle.
Right.
They can get in a pill format that allows them to increase their dosage to what they desire.
So when I look at market share for beverages in the U.S., which is kind of always not quite exact, but they look like they're in the 5-8% range. Not even.
Yeah, not even.
How do you think it'll roll?
1.5.
1 to 1.5.
Yeah, across the U.S. and there's no major brands. Right, there are no major brands.
Right, because they wouldn't touch
and
the
Lagunitas is the only one that really exists in California and Nevada. No other locations. And so that brand is the only one that a major brand has dabbled in. And what's different in Canada is that you've got somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 to $8 billion invested in beverages as a category.
Right. I mean, beer alone is $8.5 billion, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
beer as a category in Canada is $11 billion.
$11 billion.
Wholesale revenue. It's $11 billion. Wine is another $9 billion. Spirits are another $3 to $4 billion. Then you add the new RTDs that are another couple of billion and growing
fast, right?
Right. So you're looking at a $25 billion category that is alcohol. And then you take those major players, the AB InBevs, the Molsons, the Constellation brands, the Mooseheads, et cetera, and the amount of money that they have invested into the cannabis beverage space is in the north of $5 billion range.
Wow.
And so there's going to be a demand of their executives for an ROI from the billions that has been invested in this category.
So how does a Hill Street compete with that? I mean, you've got a different format.
Yeah, I mean, I view it, how do they compete with me?
Interesting.
How do they compete with me? Like, do you like Baby Duck? Or do you like handcrafted Niagara beautiful Pinot Noir?
Right.
Are you a craft beer drinker?
Yes.
Or do you drink Budweiser?
Right.
So how does Budweiser compete with craft as a category? It hasn't been able to.
Right.
That's why it's losing double-digit market share over the last 5 years. 12.5% market share in the U.S.
More discerning customers, more craft. Craft gets better distribution.
Craft gets better distribution. It's got more flavor. It's got a story behind it that the big guys can't compete with. They can't compete with locally made.
Right.
They can't compete with Michael made this in his personal tap room. You can come in and talk to Terry in my winery and see the purple fingers and know that I helped crush those grapes. Right on. And that's something that the big macro multinationals, the only way they can compete with us is to buy us and then hope we stick around to continue making the product.
Sure.
And so that's what they've been doing. But the craft and artisanal made beverage category has, as a category, been increasing in market share every year.
Right.
Every year.
So you're primed to take advantage of that. Typically in my interviews I ask what's next, but what's next for you is pretty clear.
Yeah, we're racing to the starting line.
Racing to the starting line.
Racing to the starting line.
Great way to say it.
We're sort of, trying to get to the starting line and still have a full tank of gas.
Right on.
And the capital markets are never fun when you're in that sort of mode.
Yeah.
But that's sort of where we're at as a company. Is we're just anxious to get the first one of these on the shelf so that you can take it home and share it with your friends and and go, wow, that was a real experience. That was delicious. I can't wait to buy another one.
Well, listen, let's book a meeting in the near future for when that event happens. So I want to learn all about it. Get you back on the podcast and learn all about it. For people who want to learn more about Hill Street Beverages or get in touch with you, how do they do that?
HillStreetBeverages.com.
Okay.
That's the best place to go.
Yeah.
You can catch us on Insta and Facebook at Hill Street Bevco. So at Hill Street Bevco is the handle that we have on all of our social media. And our ticker symbol is TSXV Beer.
All right. Good one.
Best ticker symbol out there, I think.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, listen,
Beer,
Terry.
easy to remember.
Terry, it's such a treat to reconnect with you. Great to see you again, and thanks for joining me on The Voice of Retail.
Pleasure.
Well, thanks to Sylvain, Morgaine, and Terry for being my guests in this episode. Well, now let's hit the highlights of the retail news in Canada and around the world with Retail This Week for the week of March 16th, 2020. Well, it's history. Well, I should say. I hope everyone is well who's listening to this podcast. These are such unusual and strange times, and Retail This Week, of course, is dominated from and around stories around COVID-19. We've never lived through anything like this, but let's just go over some of the stories that were in retail this week, and without dwelling on all the possibles and the futures, we jumped right in and looked at some of the stories that are making up the retail landscape over and beyond, I guess, or in and around COVID-19. First of all, from Vancouver Courier, great Vancouver story about a Vancouver bookstore that is delivering books, and has been for quite a while, and is delivering books to all of us who are working from home and a little bit cooped up. And from the Durham Region News, Ajax Loblaw's distribution center workers hustle to keep food flowing in Ontario and across Canada. Let's give a shout out to all the men and women who are making that happen, keeping the nation fed. Great spot here about how hard they're working at the Ajax Distribution Center and putting their heart into getting food across the country into stores, back onto shelves, and feeding the nation. Lots of stories around the food supply fears turn shoppers to Calgary's community grocery stores. And this is really about this panic buying that's happening, but is not necessary. This from the Calgary Herald. Just here, they're talking about some of the great folks at Calgary Co-op, working hard, refilling the shelves, paper products and sanitizing supplies, etc. Let's see, grocery stores struggling to keep up as shoppers clear shelves. That's from the CBC again, highlighting the nature of the supply chain. There's really no back storage areas, so how retailers reconfigured the grocery supply chain over the last 20 years is really getting the food to the right place, the right time, the right place, meant centralizing transportation systems. So they continue to work super hard. Now, it is not business as usual. The folks who are working in the warehouse, distributing and putting on shelves are observing social distancing and doing all the right things about extra steps for personal hygiene and being safe. So it is taking longer, but it's going to happen. IKEA Roots join other retailers in closing doors. A long list. It's actually probably by the weekend. That from the Globe Mail, probably longer list by the weekend, or shorter list, I should say, of stores that are actually open. So I'm not going to go through all the stores that have closed, but it's a long list of stores that have closed to help flatten the curve. Loblaw CEO vows, no, we will not raise a single price. You've got these big, great professional grocers across the country, Sobeys, Metro, Loblaw, the regionals, Longos, Save On Foods, as I said, Metro. You really just have such a group of professionals who are really focused on delivering the goods and making sure that all the prices remain where they are, and then people can be confident again in the food chain, in the supply chain. What else? It's really international. The moment of truth for online groceries has arrived. There's a great article from Forbes saying that this is it. Let's see how we as an industry, how online grocers do through all of this challenge. And this will be a level set or a new waterline, I think, for e-commerce grocery. National Retail Federation talked about expanding what is essential retail to include pet stores, truck stops, and more. So, that's a good conversation around what is essential. And very quickly, we think of pharma and food, but very quickly a need, a want becomes a need when your freezer breaks, your tap blows a faucet, or blows its top, and then you have to turn the water off. So we're working at Retail Council of Canada, working hard, amongst others in this article, National Retail Federation in the U.S., to just explain that there is a much broader range, including pet stores, by the way, pet stores, farm stores, livestock feed, hardware stores, gas stations. So just to keep in mind all the necessary retailers across the country. What else? Amazon focus on vital supplies amid COVID outbreak, and this is just talking about how they're reconfiguring their business, both in terms of shipping and receiving. And I put in a whole area here. There's a couple of stories on great indies. Don't panic over toilet paper. Parkdale business owners say, Queen and Dufferin convenience store on Queen Street West got lots of product, and the Canadians are buying in a pandemic fitness gear. So get this from Great Life Fitness and this from the Globe and Mail, keeping fit in a pandemic. I got a whole section here, retail this week, which is what I've called strategy and lessons learned. So this is, these big thinkers taking on the strategic implications and lessons learned from earlier in the year, Wuhan and from Italy, Singapore, Taiwan, countries that both were able to flatten the curve, countries that were not able to flatten the curve. So articles here from HBR, Harvard Business Review, how Chinese companies have responded to the coronavirus. Some look at the impacts on the Chinese economy. We're starting to getting the numbers, which are huge in terms of decreases. So let's keep an eye on that as well. McKinsey has a regular weekly update, implications for business, great strategic look at different scenarios and outcomes. Adweek looks at how DTC, direct-to-consumer, are leading the charge of retailers closing shops. So I'm not sure that's quite the case anymore. Everyone is doing it who doesn't need to be open. But anyway, it's a good read, talking about Glossier, Allbirds, Warby Parker were amongst the first to close. And I'm not quite sure that's exactly true. I think the biggest, maybe the biggest one certainly that was Saturday with Apple, and then Nike closely followed, and then Patagonia. So there's been quite a long list. I guess it doesn't really matter. And it all happened within days. And then COVID-19, latest updates and legal considerations, that from McCarthy Tetro. So that's a good read. Of course, get your own legal interpretation, but we're all trying to figure out interpretations of what we can and cannot do to help employees and to help each other in Canada through these most trying times. Well, that's a wrap on this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple iTunes, your favorite podcast platform, such as Spotify. I'm number one in Spotify for retail. So thanks to my friends at Spotify for that. Please rate and review, and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of M.E. LeBlanc Company, Inc. You can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great week.